Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Challenge in the Streets here from the Public Safety Training Academy. This episode is titled Above and Beyond, and we'll kind of explain the premise for this episode as we get into it. This is going to be a 90-minute episode, so just the normal housekeeping. If you're a chief officer and you need COPDI credit, please make sure you use the link on Quick Links to sign in and get your COPDI credit. So as I said, this episode is titled Above and Beyond, right? Why did we choose that title? Well, this all stems from an incident that occurred in Company 29's area that they ran in late summer of last year in August. Started out as a automatic fire alarm, basically turned into a problem that was beyond the scope of our normal fire and EMS services. So we're joined by some outside agencies, both in Montgomery County and outside, some allied agencies of Montgomery County Fire Rescue, just to better explain what resources they provide, what services they offer, and how us, as members of Montgomery County Fire Rescue, can connect with these resources to get people the help they need beyond fire and EMS service. So before we start around the table here, I'll just introduce our panel for today. Joining us, we have Assistant Chief Chase Fabrizio from the Operations XO, the Operations Division, Avital Graves, who's the EMIHS Manager for Montgomery County Fire Rescue, and kind of go around the table here. We have Ruben Rosario across the table from me, the Director of the Upcounty Regional Services Center. We have Rui Castro and Steve Marquina from DHCA from Montgomery County. We have Kurt Luthi to my left here. He's the Executive Director for this region of the American Red Cross. And then we also have Brian Barnes down at the end of the table here joining us from DPS from Montgomery County. So before we get into it, again, I'll kind of give it to Chief Fabrizio to explain a little bit more of the background as far as the organizational expectations and why this kind of stuff is so important to provide more than just the basic fire and EMS service to the citizens.
Yeah. So traditionally, the fire department, we've always looked at our role and responsibility to take sick people to the hospital and put out house fires. But the call just doesn't end there. We're a force multiplier. We're out in the streets day in and day out. We are the first line of defense for the residents and the visitors of the county. While we may run into somebody that doesn't have a medical issue or a fire, our responsibility is to recognize that, hey, they may need assistance, they may need some resources that extend beyond the fire department, and we have to connect them to the resources. And again, as we were talking earlier off camera, as they say in the FEMA classes, we're talking about that whole community approach. So the days of just dealing with an emergency and walking away are no longer for us. We are dealing with our response, and then we're helping expedite our process through the response into the recovery. We want to make that recovery process as quickly as possible and as efficient as possible. We can't do that by ourselves. We obviously have to connect the people in need to you all. So thank you for your time. Thank you for coming here and having the discussion with our panel.
Yeah, and so this isn't a new thing, right? I mean, historically, we always want to help, right? And we all know that when people don't know what to do, they'll call the fire department, right? I mean, that's just we're kind of like the catch-all, right? They have this issue, they have a problem, they don't know what to do. People have always gone above and beyond, all right, in little ways. We hear stories about shifts getting their own money together to buy toys for kids after fires, near the holidays and things like that, right? It's always happened. We always want to do what's best for everyone. But we can do that job so much better and so much easier if we know that these other resources are available, and other than just pulling money out of our own pocket and trying to do the best we can, truly getting them long-term help to get them what they need. So, yeah, like I said, not a new thing, but I think it's really an important topic, and I am very grateful for you guys coming and sharing your information with us. So I'm going to give it to Avital here to kind of just explain the specific scenario that kind of the incident that led us to this conversation.
Yeah, so this was, as Chief Machala mentioned, last summer. It was August, it was hot. Got a call around 2 o'clock in the afternoon from 29 and 22 companies who were on scene at a fire alarm. A neighbor had called saying, hey, there's a fire alarm going off somewhere, and they had checked the panel and they couldn't find anything. So they just started kind of going door to door listening for what they could hear, and they found the fire alarm, they found the source, they knocked on the door. And they found an apartment in really horrific conditions that had a disabled mom and 3 young children inside. The apartment had no working bathroom, no food in the fridge, no working appliances really of any kind. There were infestations of various kinds going on. There was a lot of dirt and debris. No real furniture to speak of. Some mattresses on the floor in the 2 bedrooms in the back. But ultimately, the crews really felt compelled to do something, right? They were really taken aback at what they found. So they called me, and I said, all right, let's start making some phone calls. And I directed them immediately to start calling Adult Protective Services and Child Welfare Services to get resources on scene. And they said, well, there's no food in the house. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to call some of the food resource banks that are up in Upcounty and in the Germantown area. And I called Upcounty Hub first, and they said, come on over. We're at the Upcounty Regional Services Center. Our office is open right now. Come take whatever you need, diapers, food, whatever you need. So I sent the ambulance over there, and they picked up food, and they also stopped and bought pizza out of their own pocket, right, because they knew the kids needed food right away and not just kind of grocery staples. So they got back on scene, and by that point, they'd actually replaced the smoke detector that was malfunctioning. And at that point, the building manager and maintenance folks walked over and saw what was going on, took one look in the apartment and said, oh, we can't have this here. These folks are out. They've got to leave. And so I got a call back, and they said, hey, can they evict them on the spot? And I called Tamala Robinson at DHCA, and I said, I'm just making sure. Can they evict them? And she said, absolutely not. And she said, where is this? And it was by this point probably closer to like 3:30 in the afternoon. She said, I'm on my way. And I said, great, I'll meet you there. So I headed over there as well. We both met up on scene. By that point, the police were there. Obviously, fire rescue units were there. We were really just trying to figure out next steps for this family, right? We didn't want them to be displaced, but we obviously did not feel safe leaving them where they were. And a DHCA inspector came on scene as well. I think he ended up finding about 60 violations in that unit, which for DHCA knowledgeable folks, that's a lot of violations to find in one small apartment. So at that point, the unit was unfortunately deemed uninhabitable and condemned, and we'll talk about kind of what condemnation means in DHCA world. But we were able to work with the Housing and Opportunities Commission because the family was on a housing voucher, and the Crisis Center ended up coming out as well. And we worked with DHCA to make sure that that family ended up getting placed. So they ended up getting, the family stepped in and was able to take them immediately, and then they got a new apartment in the Germantown area so the kids could stay in the same school district, which was really important to the mom. We made sure the mom had everything she needed for her own care and well-being. She had a wheelchair. She had medical care that she needed. And it was a really great example of all of us collaborating together and bringing together these resources on such short notice to make an immediate difference in someone's life. And that is not something that we often see the outcomes of. We see the emergency, we intervene in the emergency, and then we pass the patient off to the next step in the chain of care, and we don't often get those outcomes. So this was a really interesting case. It took several hours to resolve on the immediate side, and then several months to resolve on the long-term side.
This goes back to the point, again, of recognizing an issue and recognizing a family that was in need, that didn't know the resources, knew that they needed help, but just weren't sure how to connect it. Our personnel could have swapped out a smoke detector, they could have reset the alarm, and could have gone on their way. The fact that they continued on to ensure the family has what they needed or had what they needed, that's what we're talking about, and that's why we're here. The crew stopped to pick up pizza. They played soccer with the kids out front while this was all going through to help the emotional impact to them. That's what we're shooting for. That's the culture of who we are as Montgomery County Fire Rescue, and we have these resources to help us forward. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it's humanizing the situation too, right? Like those kids are going to remember that forever,
Yep.
right? You know, they're going to remember what Montgomery County Fire Rescue, not about us, but they're going to remember what everybody came together and did for them because of the actions of the people that were there, knowing that they needed help and getting them to the right place.
And one of the things that the officers, so we as a department recognize them with a unit citation for saying thank you, and they're going above and beyond outside of an emergency response, but just a human response. When we were having these discussions with some of the officers, they were like, we knew there was something wrong, but we just didn't know where to go. Fortunately, Avital picked up the phone and was able to answer their call for help and help facilitate this going forward. But we want to make sure every officer and everybody from the newest member that's riding the back step or is riding an ambulance all the way up to, the chief of the department knows what's out there and how we can connect everybody together.
Right. And I also want to say the crew not only made great decisions and advocated for the family, but there was no shame in any of their approaches. They were supportive. They assisted the family. There were no questions of like, how did you let it get this bad? Or how did you, how have you let your kids live like this? And that's really important. That's the difference maker in getting people to participate with us and not, work against us when we're trying to offer assistance. So I really commend the crew on their behavior there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's kind of a good segue so people now understand why all these agencies are here, right? Because they all kind of came together to help, resolve this issue. And this, I'm the same way, right? We all know the various acronyms and the agencies that are out there, but may not understand the scope of what we do. Even just like we were talking before with Red Cross, right? Typically, just as an example, right, we just use them in one fashion, typically after a fire to help with housing if people don't have someplace else to stay. But there's so many other services that they offer, which we'll talk about when we go around, that's just that a lot of people don't know about each of these agencies. So we can start going around now, I think, and just highlighting what each of these agencies not only did on this specific incident, but the services that they can provide. And then after we wrap up at the end, Avital will kind of come back and just, we'll go over and make sure everybody has the appropriate pathway and understands how the connection should be made between us and these agencies. So do you want to start off with DHCA and just allow them to give an overview? Do you think that's a good place to start? And then kind of if you have, I know, some questions or just clarifications that you want to give them. So
yeah, and I know we get into acronyms a lot. Just to clarify, Department of Housing and Community Affairs, for those who are unfamiliar, I did it too.
That would have been a good clarification for me to make. But
I do it all the time. But yeah, Rudy and Steve, if you guys want to chime in on what your role is and how you guys support us in the community.
Well, thank you for the invite. Glad to be here. Glad to assist, and of course, with different agencies to provide assistance to the community. So it's great. So as far as that scenario goes, like you said, our manager would, when a call goes out, it gets notified to our manager. Then she'll assign an inspector out to determine the condition of the unit or the property that we're responding to. Based on that scenario, it sounds like for us to determine that there's 60 violations, it's a big problem. So at that point, we decide to condemn the unit if it's a unit that's uninhabitable, and we start providing resources with our Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs as well. Crisis center numbers, it's provided to the resident or to the tenant for them to start reaching out and reaching out to those resources that we provide as well. And then from there, we start working with the owner or the landlord to make sure they bring that property back into compliance with the county codes.
So condemn, just to clarify for the folks in the field,
Sure.
Condemn means you can't sleep there, but you can come back in to work on it, make repairs,
Correct.
clean up.
That is correct.
Right.
Yeah. Condemning means, you can't sleep there. The tenant can go in to retrieve some items as long as there's fire personnel or someone that could, assist them if it's a uninhabitable unit or if it's a safety issue. So for us to make sure that no one goes back into the unit. So if it is condemned, of course, the resident will call us and ask for permission to go in, and we'll get in touch with the fire department or whoever is in charge. Sometimes there's ongoing investigations, so it's up to whoever's managing that particular area to go back for that tenant to go back and retrieve some items. So.
Sure. And we know that some people do still stay in units that have been marked as condemned, so we can't assume that a condemned notice on the door means the
Right.
unit's empty.
Right.
Is there a process that you guys prefer if we do discover someone living in a condemned unit that's been marked by DHCA as condemned?
You can always let us know. We can always do, we can only do so much.
Right.
We're not police, but we can also get the police involved to see if they can assist us with, with someone that's occupying a unit that's already condemned. So.
And condemn is like the last step in the process. You guys do
Correct.
everything in your power to avoid condemn notices. Sometimes it's really just one small thing, and I say small, but like if there's no power in the unit or there's no heat or air conditioning in the appropriate time of year, like today, a high of 88 degrees, got to have
Right.
air conditioning available, no running water. But sometimes it's a structural concern. There might be sagging ceilings from
Correct.
hoarding conditions or mold abatement issues. What do you guys follow in terms of kind of a procedure in terms of first steps and then like resorting to issuing orders, then issuing citations, and then, court?
Well, typically, we will conduct the initial inspection to, I guess, for a visual assessment of the property. If the conditions are severe enough that they may render the property condemned, then we will go ahead and do that and contact our partner agencies to see what other resources are available. Most of the properties that we deal with involve rental properties. So we will work with the landlords to also, landlords and our office of landlord tenant, to make sure that they can start communicating with the landlords and see what other options there are for the tenant to relocate elsewhere, especially when the issues have not been created by the tenant, which is sometimes what we find when there's partial damage to the property, and then maybe other areas or other units within a building are habitable, and then we can rely on the landlords to provide those resources. Just to add on to what Rudy mentioned, the only exception, I think, where we might not condemn the property off the bat will be, where we wouldn't allow the person to go back in and retrieve belongings from the property is if there's severe structural damage, because it makes it unsafe for them to go in. And that's when we will probably rely on our partners from DPS to come in and, assess the conditions, see if it's safe for them to even go in. Also, as in general, just provide some, I guess, overview of what we do is we enforce the property maintenance code, and the conduct inspections on all the rental properties in the county. And I'm sorry, my throat's a little dry.
You're good.
No problem.
First time on camera. And as part of those inspections, we find a lot of conditions sometimes that will, get us to, I guess, to work with our partners agencies to see what we can provide for the residents of the county. Make sure that the life safety devices are installed. Routinely, we inspect for smoke alarms, proper paths of egress within a home. And those are some of the things that, that we'll look for that will determine whether the property is habitable or not. If there's obstructed paths to the windows, to the doors, severe unsanitary conditions. A lot of times there's a lot of, infestation issues. And obviously the ones that we get from emergency response personnel, like, police or fire, when they go in and find conditions, whether when they assist residents or if there's an incident such as a fire. As the chief mentioned, we make sure that, when they participate in the beginning of the process, we jump in somewhere in the middle, along the middle of the process, to make sure that those properties are also secured, they're boarded up, and also that the tenant or the occupants are put in contact with resources throughout the county.
So we want to make sure that our folks are thinking, if it's housing related, it's Department of Housing and
Correct.
Community Affairs versus Department of Permitting Services.
That's correct.
So we can kind of clarify the difference, and we'll go into more detail about that. I think one of the other things that you guys do that most folks may not be aware is you guys have a contract to board up vacant or fire homes with plywood on doors, windows, et cetera. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Sure, yeah, that is correct. Once we start working a case, such as a big fire or unsecured property, then we start reaching out to our contractor to get that property secured and avoid any squatters or anything of that nature, and avoid any other fires, or if there isn't a fire on that particular property. But yeah, so any property that we come across that seems like there's windows that are broken or doors that have been busted, of course we're gonna ask for that clean and lean procedure to begin and secure that property to avoid any hazardous conditions.
And that service is offered what hours?
Any hours, basically. When we start a case, we begin the paperwork, get our contractor out there, and as soon as they can get out there, they can get out there, the next day or hopefully the same day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And weekends?
On weekends, that's still in the works.
Work in progress, that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
It
so
depends on who gets the
depends, yeah.
information, and if they're able to contact if it's an emergency, obviously contact an inspector to go out and get in contact with a contractor and get the process started. So oftentimes it's not going to happen the same day or, right after the incident. Most of the ones we see, insurance companies will go out there and they'll take care of it, but in the event that they don't, we will initiate the process and try to get it out there as soon as possible. Within 24, 48 hours, I would say is probably the norm right after an incident.
Yeah. That's great.
Chief, did you have something?
No, it's just, so going back to 60 violations in one unit or one building?
One apartment.
In one apartment. How many do you all normally, on average, find when you go into? an apartment?
Between, I said 5 and 15.
So 60,
So
60
is concerning, yeah.
and that's everything you said from egress, fire alarm systems, life safety systems,
Like safety, yeah.
cleanliness.
Yeah, just the cleanliness, condition of the walls, the floors, housekeeping, sometimes housekeeping issues. Appliances not working.
Gotcha.
Utilities cut off, so.
And this is strictly for rental units. This does not apply to, or does this apply to residential, privately owned homes? If our responders go out and they find a very similar situation, but it's a privately owned, single-family detached home,
Sure.
do you all have authority there to condemn the property and work through that process as well?
We do. I mean, the idea is, the safety of the occupant,
Right.
of course. So yes, if you come across any private homes that underwent a fire, give us a call and we'll respond and get an inspector out there and assess the situation and the severity of the condition. If it's
Outside of fire-related incidents, if we find something similar to this
Right.
Germantown incident, where it's not fire-related,
Right.
but it's a health and safety concern for the family that's there.
Of course.
In their own private residence, you have the same level of authority?
can, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we are able to go in and work with the homeowner. It makes it a little difficult at times, of course. It's their home. But we try to work with, our partnering agencies as well to try to get access or, have them see the conditions they're living in and it's a problem. So we try to provide resources to them so they can live in a better condition. So.
Yeah, I mean, Chief, to your point, I think it's almost more difficult for us in a single family or in a privately owned residence where most of the time if we go to a rental property, especially if it's in a building with on-site property management and maintenance and stuff like that, it's a lot easier without outside resources most of the time to ensure that their needs are taken care of. So I think that's a lot when all these agencies really, I mean, obviously this was a rental property in your
Right.
case, I believe, but, I think when we run that privately owned home, that's probably when this is going to be more, even more important for everybody to realize everything that's available.
Right, and this is where our MCFRS clinicians really make the difference, because what we can do is when we find these conditions, we can take photos. And we've encouraged clinicians to do that for precisely this reason, because when you go to an apartment, the landlord can grant you access. When you go to a privately owned home and the homeowner says, I'm not letting you in, DHCA is stopped at the door. And so if we have photos that we can share with our DHCA colleagues, they're able to actually go and get an administrative warrant through their Office of County Attorney and pursue legal action to justify forced entry into the home with a judge issuing a warrant. That has been a huge difference maker. And actually, some of our photos have been so compelling that DHCA has condemned the home just based on the photos that we provided without ever stepping foot into the home because they were not allowed entry.
Yes, pictures are very important, so that's
Yeah.
basically our evidence to move forward with the administrative search warrant. So if you can get pictures, that would be great.
The biggest challenge that we have is gaining entry into an owner-occupied home.
Right.
That it's what we face, yeah.
Right.
So we rely heavily on, help us tremendously if you can take pictures or even write a very beefed up narrative of what the
Right.
conditions inside the home, yeah.
And even, right, just because you go into a building that looks like apartment residences doesn't mean it's an apartment. It could be
Right.
condos that are owned, right?
Correct,
So we
yeah.
have a case like that right now that we're working through to try to gain entry. And unfortunately, the clinicians weren't able to get photos the first time we went in, but it's a condo, so the condo association doesn't really have much leverage in helping us gain entry.
I think the most important thing is for people to realize, like, initially, that's not necessarily the most important thing to find out, right? If they realize, recognizing there's a problem, documenting it appropriately, right? And getting
Take the photos no matter what.
Right. Going, following the pathway, and then eventually that stuff can be figured out. You don't need to make an inquisition, because I
Right.
think to Rudy's point, right, this a lot of this kind of sounds like punitive and like negative, right? We're talking about search warrants and getting, but it's in the interest of public safety, right? Whether it's somebody
Correct. That's correct.
that doesn't have the capacity to make their own decisions or care for themselves or whatever, right? This is, it's for a good reason. We're not,
Right.
so.
And all of these things are discussed. We actually have a county hoarding task force that was modeled on the Gaithersburg City Hoarding Task Force. And we meet every month. Actually, normally we meet right now, so I had to cancel this month's meeting. But DHCA, we have the sheriff's office, because we do deal with eviction situations. We have DPS, we have folks from like Rebuilding Together and other resources in the county, and Adult Protective Services, and we work together to address really specific cases, most of them referred by public safety, by fire rescue or police, where we're dealing with extensive hoarding situations that really need more than your typical kind of management to resolve. So, we talk about these a lot, we work through them. These are not just a point blank, throw a condemn notice on the door and kick them out and don't worry about where they
Right.
go. We all, are working towards
Which is why some of our other
management.
agencies
Right.
are here. So I think it's a good,
Right.
so believe it or not, we're already 30 minutes in. So it's a good segue. And obviously, as we can come back, if there's more clarifications and questions as we go through the pathways later on for each of the agencies. But I think it'd probably be a good time to go over to Ruben
Yeah.
to talk about now, hey, we had to initiate this process with DHCA. Well, now how do we help these people, right? So do you have anything specific, or you just want Ruben to start kind of explaining their role in this? Or
Yeah, I'd love to give you the floor to just talk about the regional services centers in the county and Upcounty and what you guys do.
Sure, absolutely. So thank you again for having me. And thank you to those fire rescue personnel who I know they received the unit citation, but on behalf of Germantown and the Upcounty, thank them as well, right? The county executive's office, has a regional services director in the 5 different regions of the county. It's just divided up geographically. We work under the direction of the county executive. We work hand in hand with county council as a shared resource, and it's a very close partnership, and ultimately for the community, right? So I personally represent the Upcounty Regional Services area, which is the northern half pretty much of Montgomery County, and then the bottom half are represented by, we have Jacob Newman in the Silver Spring region. We have Jeru Bande on the East County region, and then we have 2 more, Mid-County and Bethesda Chevy Chase, that are currently in transition because people have stepped away. So there are other people there. But our role is it's pretty broad. It's essentially to be an extension of the county executive's office in our respective regions. Not a replacement, but an extension. And like I said, to work hand in hand with county council and make sure that the community has all of the resources that it needs on a regular basis. So the technical, maybe job description verbiage would be to facilitate the delivery of all, local government services to the community, and that happens in many different ways. One is responding to large-scale events. In some ways, it's just taking phone calls from individual members of the community. It's partnering with countless nonprofits and stakeholders throughout the community that provide all sorts of resources and have sort of access points and avenues to the community that local government can have a hard time finding. And it means for the 5 of us running, or I would say assisting with the running, if you will, of a regional services center. So they're all a bit different. Like I said, there's 5. They're all a bit different. In Germantown, we have a lot of resources because, as I described, we represent about half the county's land area. You mentioned the Upcounty Hub, which I was happy to hear, was able to help in this situation. The Upcounty Hub is actually a nonprofit that works hand in hand with the county. They are founded and led by Grace Rivera-Oven, who is the school board president. And we have a very close partnership with them. They receive a lot of support from HHS in terms of funding, and they occupy a very large space within the Regional Services Center, and they provide food to, I think it's over 1,500 families per week.
Wow.
And they also have a diaper distribution. They have an MCPS joint program. They do a lot of work. So, of course, If, a situation like this comes up and there's an opportunity for them to step in to support a family in need, in alignment with the call of the county that no one's going to be forgotten or left alone here in our lovely county, they're going to respond. There's also a lot of cultural competency and things that go into the conversation. So many of our regional services directors will respond out to incidents because, there'll be language challenges, there will be food considerations, what type of food, right? The Upcounty Hub would be aware of that, but there may be different providers that provide a specific kind of food for a family. They may have children. We have to connect with MCPS. Within the Upcounty Regional Services Center, we also have another nonprofit called the Housing Initiative Partnership. So, assisting residents with finding everything involving home ownership and renting. On the second floor, we have predominantly our health and human services offerings, and that consists of medical and dental screenings. We have rental support. We have income support. The Office of Service Eligibility is there. We probably have about 1,200 residents a day that come to the center for support. Now, the hours can be a bit of a limitation. I know Fire Rescue is one of the great agencies out there 24/7. Our building is open from 8:30 to 5 p.m. weekdays. Weekends were closed, but every one of our regional services directors, like I said, is accustomed to receiving calls from emergency management or anyone else in need through the night, and we will do our best to connect people to the resources that are needed. We work very closely with county council, so on large-scale operations, we're always communicating with them. Sometimes the members come out and they respond and close gaps, or sort of a fail-safe, sort of an insurance policy against people who work in silos, and certainly we hope an insurance for people who have needs that are not being met by our sort of standard responses, but need sort of nuance and more sensitive or delicate responses from the county.
And so we talk about you're obviously a hub in the northern end of the county.
Sure.
If there are other if some of the other service centers don't have the ability or don't have a hub set up to distribute, let's say if we come across a family that's in need of some food and some diapers, we from another part of the county that maybe doesn't fall within your jurisdiction, those services are accessible for if we're trying to help close that gap and build something in the meantime.
Sure, absolutely. I mean,
We're not turning anybody away or anything.
right, exactly. I mean, we know that there's a no wrong door policy pretty much throughout the county. So, as much as we might compete as 5 different regions socially and things, we work hand in hand, side by side. So yeah, and anytime, really, if you only remember me, and because I shared my information or whatever, and you call me for anything down county, it wouldn't change the response. I'll probably reach out to the regional services director down there and try to, link them up because they'd be more better suited and more knowledgeable about the region. But without hesitation, if there's a need that any of us can provide, our entire community engagement cluster is going to respond.
Perfect. Good to know.
Yeah, I think, so I knew where the Upcounty Regional Services Center was. I honestly didn't really have a whole understanding of how big of a hub that actually was. So as far as like you said, you're a catch-all, right, which is great between these nonprofits and other HHS having those services there. So, for something like this, right, this situation, we recognized it was a problem. DHCA was able to say, hey, we confirm they can't live there. Well, now how do we get them this help? That's a great resource for all these different things. Like you said, the diapers, the food, they kind of all come from that one place. And again, we will go over the pathways for everybody. Because everybody's probably, oh, this is great. Like, now do I call Ruben? Do I have his phone number? How do I get to him? This
Right.
sounds like, he could be a great help, but we will go over that. So, did you have any specific questions for, or additional things you wanted to ask Ruben about to clarify for his role?
No, I think that was a great summation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I guess we'll just keep going around the table. So again, the distinction between DPS and DHCA, to me, in my fire rescue mind, right, it's like, oh, they do kind of a similar thing, right? It's code enforcement. Well, one's Department of Permitting Services, one's Department of Housing, one enforces codes, but what exactly is the difference in the services? Again, we're most familiar with DPS, I think, from a company officer level. We were talking a little bit before, like, you run a fire alarm, can't get the system to reset, sprinkler activation, something like that. You call the on-duty code compliance, which is somebody from your department, correct, Brian?
Correct.
And then, they take some information from us, and that's generally the end of it. But can you just explain a little bit more about your role as far as what your side of things does?
In reference to the incident happened in Germantown, we're kind of small on that because of the fact that it was inside a private residence. We don't have a jurisdiction inside the residence, but we do get a lot of calls for hoarding. So what we do is we'll collect the information, we'll pass it on to the correct agency, which is what we'll do, because there's not much we could do for that. But outside of that, unless the hoarding goes into the common areas, then that's where we get involved. We have jurisdiction within the common areas, and the way we can assist you with stuff like that is, hypothetically, if something, to assist the fire department, we mainly assist with like automatic fire alarms and sprinkler systems like you're asking about. If your engine company runs this particular building, and you find an issue with the fire alarm or with the sprinkler system, hypothetically, an engine company, a lot of times they'll run an alarm 2 or 3 times before they call us. We ask that if they run an automatic fire alarm inside that building and they reset it and it clears the first time they go in, that's kosher, not a problem. But if they run it a second time, that's when they need to call us, as soon as they call us. Because our job is to try to keep these engine companies in the station and not running these nuisance alarms. Because the more times you put that apparatus on the streets, you're putting hazards to the public too. These trucks are big. Depending on what the nature of the alarm is, they're running lights and sirens. They got to clear intersections and so forth, and we don't want them to get involved in an accident. Plus, a nuisance alarm is taking that apparatus away from a true emergency if it's really needed. But we can assist them with those kind of things. And inside my agency, hypothetically, we get calls for cars in the buildings. If we can be requested to come out, we'll come out. We don't have the general knowledge to determine if this building is safe to occupy or not, because that's not quite our background. Our background is code compliance, fire alarms, and so forth. We have contact with either residential or commercial construction, which we will contact them, and they'll send an inspector out to look at it to make sure the building is safe and so forth. We might post the building non-occupiable like they do, but what we're looking at is there a possibility that this building something could happen to somebody enters that could come down, or we could post an area off limits. We've done it before in a restaurant. Hey, you can use the front half of the restaurant, but don't use this portion of it until you get an engineer to come in and evaluate, make sure these buildings are safe. But there's a lot of different things that we can assist the fire department with. There's 12 of us for the entire county, and our primary mission for code compliance is we do all the inspections for the county. Our primary inspections are licensed agencies such as daycares, groups homes, assisted livings, and we do all the schools. Those are priorities. Those are priorities. Unsprinkler high-rise is on our priority list also, to go through those buildings and make sure things are safe within those buildings, egress and so forth, fire doors are working and so forth. And then we get into the standard buildings like Safeway. We go in, they have fire alarm sprinkler systems. We inspect those once a year. They're required to submit the documentation for their fire alarms and sprinkler systems, and then whatever other testing is required, the 5-year and 3-year testing. And then we do a common walkthrough of the building to make sure things are kosher. There's no issues with blocked egress, especially around the holidays. As you know, when you get the holidays, they fill them up, and you guys call, like Safeway in Germantown made a change, which I got a call from 29, which was Paul. Gave me a call, hey, you want to take a look at this? And we'll go out and we'll look at that kind of stuff to make sure, can they do this or can they not do this? And then we make contact with the manager of the store or the chain. We have contacts for a lot of the what do you want to call them, the corporate offices to remedy these type of problems. But the big thing we ask that when the engine companies do go someplace and they find an issue with a fire alarm, the most important thing they can get for us is contact information. Nothing's worse than for them to go to an automatic alarm 2 or 3 times, and the third time be 2 o'clock in the morning. They'll say, hey, we went to XYZ location. We had a problem with the fire alarm. Can you follow up for us? And they don't give us any contact information. And a lot of times the engine companies, when they're there, they make contact with somebody, and that little bit of contact information can greatly help us out to take care of these problems. And the way they can contact us, there's 2 ways that we have that they contact us. We're on is it called the morning brief?
On the doc log that comes out to our command staff and our
we have
office.
one guy on call 24/7, 365 days a year. Our name is on that doc sheet. Or they can go through the DPS web email address and email us. If it's something like something that they consider a major issue, I personally prefer a phone call, so I can talk to you while they're there, get the information I need. If it's something like a Knox box issue, you can email us. That's not a dire emergency. You can email us and we'll follow up the next day.
And that's at dps.fcc@montgomerycounty
Yes.
md.gov.
Yep,
email address.
exactly.
When we're talking about making notifications and sort of you're talking about following up and resolving issues, in significant issues. So significant is subjective in terms of the individual that's calling. What do you consider a significant issue, or what would be something that would be a required phone call? And then on top of that, what is the information? What separates you pursuing that the next day as opposed to coming out that night? So I think there's some clarification on that would probably help.
Oh, like if they call us, hey, they got a broken pull station, and they'd be like, that's not really oh my God, we got to handle it right at the bat. The fire alarm's going to go into trouble. But if take a building that takes a lightning strike, we got storms getting ready to come up. They take a lightning strike, knocks the fire alarm system out of service. That's something we need a phone call on. We need it right then, right there. We will determine the type of fire watch or fire impairment plan that needs to go into effect. Like, you'll get a lot of people immediately, oh my God, the fire alarm's out of service, we immediately got to go into fire watch. That's not always true, depending on the type. If it's a high-rise residential, depending on what it is, we have a process that we go through. It might only involve implementing their impairment plan. But if you get but in reference to your question, we consider an immediate, like if you get a fire alarm that's knocked out of service, that's life safety. We need to know about that right off the bat. You have a fire in an apartment and the systems are impaired, we need a phone call. We need to take care of this right off the bat. Because a lot of times, if you just have one sprinkler head popped in an apartment, that might knock the whole system out of service for the entire building. And we want to get that corrected right off the bat.
Right. Okay. And not every one of those will require an immediate response on-scene visit from an inspector, or will that? Or
not all the time. No, a lot of times we can take care of it a lot quicker if you give us the contact information by starting it with a phone call. But if you request us to come to the scene, like myself, I usually don't argue. I'll say, hey, if you request me, you probably need me. I'll come down and I'll ask a few questions, but then I will show up. I will come out.
cool.
Yeah, no, thank you. I say, it's another one of those things where we go someplace, we make sure the building's not on fire, we put the fire out or whatever, shut the sprinkler system down. Well, we have an obligation beyond that to make sure the rest of the people in that building are safe, and that's when it comes down to you guys. So we're getting a little bit into pathways, but I know you guys are always open to being a resource. Right, I've called several times in my role as a battalion chief now where I wasn't sure, right, either, so there are other agencies in the county, like other jurisdictions, Rockville City, Gaithersburg City, that provide the same service on the city level. They don't do that on weekends, right? So you guys cover for those places. So even if I don't know, I would call, and you guys always have given me the information. Either, yes, that's going to be us right now. No, it's not. Yes, we need to come out. No, we don't. So it's just a good resource. Even if we're not sure if we need you, it's always a resource there, that on-call person to get.
Another instance, like you mentioned, where we pull other agencies in, hood activations is a big one. We'll get a lot of hood activations. They think, okay, the hood's activated, we'll just notify code compliance that we're good to go and they'll leave. Not really. Once the hood activates, we get the health department involved. There's a lot of other people that get involved in this because of the hazards of the chemicals that come out. I've gotten calls before and they say, hey, we had a hood activation. I show up, the engine company said that they told the owner, hey, I'm coming out to open. We show up and they're open and they're operating, and they got the chemical all over the place. Mm-hmm. So we shut them down. We'll shut them down until they get it cleaned up and the health department shows up. But there are other agencies that a lot of times we call that you guys don't see what's going on once we arrive.
So I think it just goes to say, if we as the end user follow the correct pathway, depending on what the scenario is, it's not like we have to make 900 phone calls and follow up the next 3 shifts. If we follow, everybody who needs to find out is going to find out, as long as we use the correct pathway, depending on what the issue is. So. Do you have anything else for DPS before we move on to Red Cross, and then we can continue? Because we're already button up. We're moving.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if you wanted to touch a little bit on how fire code compliance plays in the sandbox with FEI, and how you guys kind of hand off things to each other and work together.
Yeah, the way we work with FEI has the authority for arresting. They have police. They're basically Montgomery County police officers is the way I look at it. We come in and do things like, an example would be there's a large building, there's a large high-rise in the county that has a lot of automatic alarms getting pulled and so forth going on. A lot of times the engine companies will call us. We'll get there and find out it's malicious alarms. After so many times doing this, sometimes it's accidental. A kid goes through, hits one of them, didn't know what it was, pulls it, not a big deal. But if it's malicious alarms multiple times, then we have to turn it over to FEI. They will follow up and take care of that. They'll get the information from us, what we need, and then we turn it over to them. Like for a little while, if you remember in was it Silver Springs, they had the building that blew up from the gas leak?
Yeah.
We worked with them for a little while. I was on that call, and I worked with them for a little while, taking care of the surrounding units and so forth, and then passed on information to them because they needed some of the information we have in order to fulfill their case.
That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, again, just to wrap that end of it up. So DHCA, I mean, again, this is kind of a similar in my head, kind of similar thing, but DHCA is more living conditions inside a unit or a building or a house.
Property
they're-
maintenance, yeah.
Property maintenance.
Yes, sir.
They're the resource. Any like safety issue, whether it's a life safety system, structural issue, you guys would be the contact because you have that end of it. So,
But there's some
actually-
restrictions on that though, right? That's only for
We
rental, commercial properties,
Correct.
multi-occupancy is not.
We don't have any authority inside of private residence.
What about a vehicle into a private residence? Who would handle that? Like a
We come
structurally
in, we'll come
sound
in
building?
and we will come in and look at that, and then we will call residential, our side of it that handles those type of things. And then they'll come in and do the inspections and so forth for it. And we immediately notify housing, and housing will work with us on it too.
But the pathway would still be the on-call.
Usually it
On-call.
starts with us.
Okay, starts with you, then you can get it to the other side of DPS, who could eventually get it to DHCA if need be.
Correct, and like I said, we don't have any authority inside of them. Certain things we can help with. And if it's a fire, we can post a house, as well as I think housing will come in behind us, and we'll make notification to them.
And vice versa.
I think that's a good thing for chief officers, because it's not something I remember. You know, we take in so much information, we're doing our training and stuff like that, about contact, like after a fire, right? Again, I know from being a unit officer for fire alarm issues and stuff like that to contact, and maybe it was during my bump up training with another battalion chief, or that's why we do that, right? But they were brought up, hey, after a fire, just give code a call. I'm like, I got to give the on-duty code a call. I just didn't know that was a thing, like after a fire. And I think, I don't know, hope maybe other people didn't realize that either, but after a fire, we should be notifying you, correct? If there's some, like displacement of significant incident, not a nickel and dime person's going to reoccupy, but a significant fire where somebody can't reoccupy, we should be calling the on-duty code. Is that correct?
You can give us a call, and then what we'll do is we'll take information on the phone and let you know where we stand within that portion of it. They might say, hey, no, we can't do anything with you to assist you because it's a private residence. We make notifications. That time, that's how they'll find out.
Okay.
And every time we receive a call, we do what's called a call-out list or a call-out report. It's on the web. We fill it out, and as soon as we hit send, it goes to all the key agencies.
About getting that information to the correct people.
Right. But then if it's myself and a lot of us, we'll also follow with a private email to him. Like I'll send an email directly to housing. Hey, this is what I have. What's going on? This is who I am. This is your contact information. This is the engine company was on the scene. This is what happened. And then they reply back, got it, we'll take it from here.
Cool. All right. Anything else for DPS, or are we ready to continue around the table?
Let's keep rolling.
All right. Yeah. Kurt, you've been waiting this whole time. So thank you for your patience. So yeah, a little bit about, I don't know if you guys had a specific role in this incident, but we talked a little bit about your traditional roles as far as how Montgomery County Fire Rescue usually interacts with Red Cross. But you want to just expand a little bit more on, specifically what you do, your role, and then a little bit more about what the agency can provide beyond just coming out after a fire.
Yeah, so the Red Cross, if we look at the Red Cross across the country, including Montgomery County, like the number one thing that we do day in and day out is take care of people who have been displaced from home fires or their residents. And so we do that in Montgomery County often, right? And we want to make sure that the people who are displaced have, depending on the level of damage, depending on the timing for how long they're displaced, whether they can reoccupy. So all of those standard kind of things that we're taking into consideration, we have a whole series of services that we can provide based on their details. And oftentimes if somebody is displaced and it's going to be a longer road to recovery, we do even have some direct financial assistance that we can provide to people. There's a lot of details around that, right? And so we want to make sure that that any time that there are people affected we talked about this off camera, right? We used to say displaced, right? But we really want to start using language about being affected by a call where you guys are responding. And so if there's people that are affected, especially if they're displaced, we want to make sure that we start to provide some of those services. Some of those services include, we can provide some direct financial services, but we also have health services. So we have licensed healthcare professionals that volunteer through the Red Cross that will actually go and determine whether they lost a pair of glasses, prescription glasses in a fire. They lost their walker, they lost a CPAP machine, whatever the durable medical equipment that they might have lost. And so our licensed healthcare professionals will actually work with the doctor, work with the pharmacy, and then we'll actually pay for that to get replaced. And so that's a big one for people as they kind of try to navigate what they actually, because a lot of people don't really realize all the things that got affected in a fire like this, right? The other one is like the mental health. So we also have licensed mental health professionals that will come around, and they'll start to work with them in those initial stages of, working through their recovery. And sometimes it's nice to just have a trained professional that's going to listen to you, and they can sit down and make sure that you're taking your deep breaths, you're doing those calming things, asking you those good listening questions so that you can start to get yourself in the right headspace to do that recovery. And so that's a really important one. The last one I'll tell you now is like we also work with chaplains and other ministers, so we provide spiritual care. And so if a person who has been affected would like somebody to talk to on the spiritual side, like we have people that volunteer with us that we would also sit down with them. And really part of that is to actually get them reconnected to, a house of worship or a local spiritual leader that's close to where they've been displaced from. So like it's all about like just making sure that they have the building blocks to start that recovery process.
Excellent.
So I think that's one of the things that is going to be a change of practice, or I know it's going to be a change of practice for us and our incident commanders. After a couple high-profile fires this winter, we received a phone call of well, why wasn't Red Cross notified? And it's, well, nobody was they were displaced, but they had places to go.
Yeah.
And then your team, you and your leadership partners explained all these wrapped around services.
Yeah.
That's not just about the displacement. It's to help with that whole recovery process to go on from there. Unfortunately, we had a fatal fire 2 weeks ago in the Bethesda neighborhood that resulted in a so there were siblings, but they were adult siblings. One was mentally what's the correct term?
Challenged.
Disabled, challenged, and the caregiver for that person perished in the fire. So while the Red Cross was assisting with multiple other agencies within county government, Red Cross not only was looking at the disaster response for that, but hours later there was a team that was a disabled disaster response team that was helping this individual because their caregivers were deceased or incapacitated in a rehab facility. So the care and the wraparound services go way beyond just saying, here's a hotel room for the night.
Yeah.
It's eye-opening. So we, operations, are working with the leadership team of the Red Cross to get all of our chief officers, all of our CCOs, information sheets of all the wraparound services, numbers to call, and whatnot. So our practice coming soon will be that after any incident, no matter whether that person has a place to go or not, that we're going to be reaching out and having Red Cross contacted.
Yeah.
One of the other things you brought up when we were discussing, so outside of fires, one of your first days in the field, or your first day in the field, you had a pretty challenging call at Wooten, dealing with a school shooting. So we look at, again, a response in its entirety with police, OEM, public schools. Red Cross is available to use to help at that reunification center for mental and behavioral health, in helping the parents and the students that are affected. So you're a force multiplier that can help us across the board, just besides the one service that we traditionally think of you as.
Yeah, a lot of people forget how calming a bottle of water and a snack can be, right? So if you have a licensed professional that's
I mean, something like that, it's relatively simple, was a
Super
struggle,
simple.
that day. You know, and not for a lack of anybody trying. I mean, like, I was even making, like, I was like, maybe we could provide that. Like, I know it's going to take a while, but we might be able to do, like, just,
No.
I didn't even think of Red Cross in that case, you know? So it's definitely good information to get out there for everybody because it's not on the forefront.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we're hoping with the materials you can provide, to
Yeah.
be able to get that to all of our CCOs across the board. Our leadership team, there's going to be a lot of information that's going to be coming to them for a call down process, for resources that are available, and try to keep everybody on the front minds of our responders out there to understand that, hey, this is a whole community approach.
Yeah, and if I can, I say one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the last thing I'd say is, like, you said, the whole community. You know, we're thinking about the whole community, and our caseworkers who kind of walk with a family or an individual through their recovery, they are looking at all of the partners that are at this table and in the community, and we are trying to make those connections on behalf of those families or individuals. And so this is why I just want to say thank you. Like, this is great to be around this table. It's great to kind of meet other partners and continue to work together, because we do feel like we want to be a good partner in that whole community response.
Yeah, we talk about, you know, the organization, right? Understanding, like, when you're in a firehouse in the county, in your community, like, you're truly a pillar of the community, right? You're part of that community, you're part of that fabric, just like your responders that come out. The disaster response team, are all volunteers that come out?
It's almost entirely volunteers.
Yeah, so I mean, that's, to me, I had a fire a couple weeks ago, right? And a bunch came out. It was a Monday night, but Monday night kind of late, and I think there was like 4 or 5 showed up like relatively quick, very professional, very nice, thanking me for calling them out, so they could, like, I was like, oh, what are you thanking me? Thank you, you know what I mean? Like, thank you for coming in and helping these people, right? So, no, it's something for these people, you know, any of us to keep in mind, right, when they come out to assist us. You know, be patient, right? They are volunteers. They might, I don't know what your typical response time looks like. I know, in my experience, it's typically within like an hour or so of me calling. Is there any, like, rule to that?
Yeah,
or
we
how long
try.
it takes?
Well, we train to inside of 2 hours, but
Okay.
you know, the faster the better, right? The faster you can get there and take care of somebody, that's what we're striving for.
And I just also want to make sure that we brought you all at the table for resources and code compliance we deal with on a regular basis, but we don't get to see your work that you do behind the scenes day in and day out. Don't forget, and we also have other partners that we deal with on a daily basis. That's why they're not here. OEMHS and HHS, when we're dealing with large-scale incidents, we deal with them, I don't want to say on a daily basis, but very frequently. And they are also very visible, very standing side by side with us. Not that you all aren't, but it's. I don't know if it's as visible of the work that goes on behind the scenes and all the other services that you offer. So we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the
Absolutely.
OEMHS and the HHS aspect.
Yeah, I actually had a note here, right, that there are so many other allied agencies and stuff that we do work with like that. But yeah, absolutely. And we've had some of those folks on as well, obviously, before to kind of help explain that. But
Going back to displacements or affected residents, what's sort of your cap where we may be at a point where if we have a home where we have 8 residents and 10 dogs, or do we have 2 people and 2 dogs, or what's sort of your limit that you sort of feel comfortable
There's
with
no
your
cap on
response?
that.
Nothing?
There's
Okay.
no cap on that, because when we start getting around, 20 people, we start to consider whether it's a mass care operation, right? So whether we'll open an emergency shelter in a gymnasium or in a church basement or something like that. But we definitely have a process to transition and scale up no matter what the size of the incident is.
so that was kind of on my, I had a note here, actually. It's funny you say that I was like, okay, and my note says when, like a regional service center versus Red Cross versus OEMHS, right? Because a lot of those, all 3 of you can kind of help do the same things, right? And again, it goes back to the pathways, and we talk about the appropriate way to do this, but I mean, they're all going to work together at a certain point.
So for our chief officers, they all have, we've given them some guidelines and some guardrails of when we reach a certain cap of displacements, of when to bring in OAMHS.
Sure.
But sometimes those lines kind of bleed over because we're talking about multi-occupancies, we're talking about a lot of people affected. we know that we could run an apartment that's a 2-bedroom apartment that has 8 people living in there that doesn't necessarily meet that threshold for an EMIHS response. So then the question comes in, and they'd be willing to help, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But that also brings the question of, hey, can Red Cross support this or not, or do we have to call? So,
Yeah, and just to put you at ease, like when we see it's a multifamily fire, or multi-units that are affected, like we're talking with our partners there as well. Yeah.
perfect.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, so that was our roundtable. So thank you everybody for giving, kind of sharing your piece. I know it took a while to get all the way to the end here, but to give it back to Avital just to really start talking about those pathways. And now that we know what everybody does, we've seen an example of crews going above and beyond, right? Finding those pathways. We know now what each of these allied agencies can bring to the table. How do we, once we recognize something, whether it's the brand new firefighter riding the ambulance, right? They recognize, they see this as, I need to do something for this person, to the chief officer on the scene. How do we reach these resources and get people this help, and how do they know where to go?
Yeah, so I think, the good news is we have a lot of established pathways already, right? We know if there's a fire and we need support, we're going to ask ECC to call the Red Cross for us and get them out on scene, right? And we have ways of reaching fire code compliance through the doc log, through ECC, right, through email. So we have these established paths, and we don't want to kind of roll over those, and we don't want to take away independence and ability from officers to be able to react in real time in the middle of the night when they need the help that is needed. But for some other things, especially things around like Department of Housing and Community Affairs, those kinds of incidents we'd prefer to go through MIH, because then I can track it on my end to make sure that we're communicating with DHCA about what happened, make sure we're following up, try to address any immediate needs. And, there's always that kind of like fork in the road, right, where we run a call and we're really concerned. If we can get the patient to the hospital, we have less concern because they're safe in that moment. If the person's refusing to go to the hospital or doesn't have a reason to go to the hospital, now we're a little more concerned because that person is staying in that unsafe environment, and we obviously want to intervene as soon as possible. But given that MIH doesn't work at night and DHCA doesn't have overnight hours either, those are things where, we rely very heavily on the clinicians to make the MIH referral and submit that information to us through the EMEDS report, through the fire app report, through an email to us, text message, pigeon, smoke signals. I answer my phone at all hours. I really shouldn't. And the MIH hotline that we have, which, surprise, spoiler alert, it just rings to my cell phone. It's just a Google Voice number that comes to me. So we try to be as responsive as possible, but we did make an app. So for the fire folks who are listening in, you may not be as familiar with the EMIHS reference app. Shout out to Captain Will Tipton for putting this together. He did a really great job kind of solidifying EMS information, and we rely on this really heavily to direct clinicians when they have questions around CPGs or protocols or medication dosing and things like that. But if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see an MIH referral guide. And when you click on that, what we tried to do here was make a quick reference app for our front seat folks to be able to know where do we go when we have questions and what's the best path. A lot of these are circular, so you'll see that they lead to kind of the same outcomes, and that's intentional because we only have a few ways for you to reach MIH, and we want to reinforce those. But for example, if we have a DHCA condition, unsafe living condition, you might say it's a hoarding condition. You're going to get this quick read reminder, refer the patient to MIH. If there's any self-neglect or abuse, please notify APS or CPS as appropriate, as well as MIH. And then we attached an example hoarding scale down here. So you can kind of give us a sense, like on a scale of 1 to 9, how bad is the hoarding? And then it'll push you down to make a referral to MIH. All of these will give you further information. So if you forgot how to refer to us in EMEDS, there's a little sheet here. It works a lot better on a cell phone, so apologies for the small print. And if you need to make a referral to us through email, if you click this, it'll actually open a default email so that you can do it right from your phone. And it'll open a default email right to our shared inbox, so we don't have to worry about you copying and pasting. There are also a lot of phone numbers in here that are quick phone numbers, so you don't have to copy and paste it. It'll pull up automatically in your phone. And the idea here is that we really want you to be able to make the right referral the first time. We don't want to give you a whole bunch of different answers that send you running around in circles to reach different folks and someone's not answering their phone. If the patient is, refusing transport, we have a list of options here around substance use disorder, behavioral health, how to engage the stabilization room at the crisis center, again, how to make a referral, how to document leave behind Narcan. All of these things, it sounds unrelated. Well, I'm clicked on the hoarding one. Why are you giving me information about behavioral health? Well, hoarding is a behavioral health disorder. It's listed in the DSM-5 now. There are underlying behavioral health issues that usually go hand in hand, and we need to address those until we can expect the hoarding to be cleaned up. So what we ask of you guys is to use this app to your benefit. If you see something and you're like, man, they're missing X, Y, and Z, please let me know, because we're updating this all the time. We just took out the hypothermia one for shelter overflows because we're in spring now, so all the overflow shelters, beds closed. But it has everything, and we even put in a food insecurity resource guide here. The idea here is there are county resources in place for food insecurity. If you call 311 or direct a person to call 311, they're open and they can offer people direct resources. But there's also a really great food resource calendar, and I already have it pulled up here. This is every single place that gives out food every day of the week, and it is updated very regularly. And you can see that, it's just endless. There are so many. They're all over the county. There is, no excuse for anyone to go hungry in Montgomery County because we have such a robust system. So these are the above and beyond things. These are the things, no, you're not going to learn this in EMT class. You're not going to have this in strategies and tactics, but this is the difference maker where you can say to someone, hey, right now, starting in 15 minutes, there's going to be a distribution center opening 3 blocks away. Can we get you there? Can we help you get food? Can we figure out a way for you to get some dinner for tonight? These are the things that we really want to be able to provide with you so that you have the opportunity to do that and aren't feeling helpless or stymied or confused about where you can send folks to. So we're always trying to make this better for our folks, and anything that our front seat folks think we need to add here, please let us know. We're wide open to suggestion.
And I'll add that after hours, outside of items from the quick links page or from the EMIHS page, work through your chain, reach up to the battalion chief will reach out to the duty chief, and then the duty chief and the ops team all together will work through, if we have to connect with the regional services coordinators, directors and whatnot, we'll close the gap that way as well. But obviously for record keeping, there is obviously an established process here, but there are a couple different, this is our primary pathway.
Right.
But outside of nights and weekends, off hours, trying to make personal contact with some of the personnel, work through your chain of command on some of that. Also to piggyback, I know the field is doing a great job, and sometimes it definitely becomes overwhelming when you have 3 or 4 community events in a day that you may have to attend in a neighborhood, at a church, at a school. This is also where we build those relationships and we find out where those resources within your specific community are. National Night Out, when you go around National Night Out and you see all the different nonprofit organizations that are out there. I know when I was a field BC and you'd make your rounds, it's like, oh, that's a resource for us to use in this area of the county that may not be publicly listed on any of our documents. So that's the other important part of obviously not only, passing on the safety message, but building that relationship with the community, building those relationships with those entities that can help us and help the community. So,
Yeah, I was actually going to bring the same wavelength as far as somebody runs this call in the middle of the night in the ambulance, right? They're not sure what to do. They don't remember. They know it's a problem. They don't know. They don't think to look there. They're not sure if they can get that resource. Call your officer, right? They should know. Maybe they don't know. Well, I hope that they're going to call me, right? I don't want anybody to think that, look, I'm at work. I don't know what I don't see, right? Just like the unit officer doesn't know what they don't see. When the ambulance goes out and they're at the firehouse, not on the same run. So use those resources, like you said, go up the chain. We're all there to help. I might not know either, so I'm going to go to the duty chief. They might not know. They might go to you, right? Yeah. We're all on the same team. We're all trying to do the right thing to get the people to help, no matter what that is.
We're resource rich. We're fortunate. We're in a county that has agencies, government agencies, nonprofit agencies that are there to help. Again, it's the communications, building those relationships, and just figuring it out. Sometimes it's not immediate. Sometimes it's as you said, a couple phone calls, a couple emails. Last Friday, again, or 2 Fridays ago, with the fire in the Bethesda neighborhood, there were a lot of complexities that were there. The battalion chief was on the phone. I was the duty chief for the day. I was on the phone. We were all everybody was doing their part. Red Cross came out. HHS was involved. Adult Protective Services was involved. I mean, it was a large response that required, a half hour worth of emails and phone calls just to get it started and make sure we're in the right place. So.
Yeah, I think it was indirectly mentioned, but something I didn't realize too when we talked about the wraparound services for Red Cross on a fatal fire, right? And you mentioned offering that support, that mental health aspect of it too. But obviously somebody may or may not be displaced. There may be family that shows up from someplace else as the incident goes on. But I never thought of Red Cross as a resource for that. But having somebody there beyond, again, most of our EMS duty officers are excellent at things like that, but they're not. They don't have a degree in that, right? In counseling, or most of them, some of them might, I don't know, but they're usually very personable. But having somebody who's a professional and knowing how to deal with that there could help. So giving them a call.
I don't know where we are on time, but one of the
We're good.
Okay.
We got 15 minutes.
So family members, we talk about in the human aspect of this. We have a lot of people that their pets, they're closer to their pets than they are some of their own family members. What kind of services can Red Cross help with that as well?
We
If
can.
they're
Yeah.
pets that are injured or displaced?
Yeah, we've actually made some, we've come around in our thinking because we know that people consider their pets part of their family. I would even point people to our pet first aid app.
Okay.
We have, if you want to know how to take care of your pet, if they're in. So we definitely work with families, the whole family.
Yeah, and we also work with the county's animal shelter.
For sure.
So
That's
the
right.
animal shelter has a safe keep program. They use fosters to basically temporarily hold pets when a owner is incapacitated for whatever reason. It's on a case-by-case basis, but they can keep the animal for a longer period of time, and they don't put them up for adoption or anything like that until the owner can take them back. So we've worked with them very closely. And another, partner group that I wanted to give a shout out to, Community Risk Reduction, our partners in CRR, we work closely with them in making sure that we're addressing these fire safety, concerns. And we did cross-reference them in our app to make sure that you have no concerns or questions about how to access CRR, and make a referral to them as well so that they can come out and do a home safety assessment, install smoke detectors.
That brings me to a question. I just brought it up. I never thought of it before. We find an issue, say in a high-rise building, right? We call code to deal with the issue immediately. Is that something we should also follow up with the CRR team, or is that something that you guys ever interface with our community risk reduction team and fire rescue? Or if you see an issue, if we notice it, we're going to send you guys out to go deal with it. But now, does there need to be an education component
For the
in
rest
there?
of the building,
Right.
yeah.
Is that so? I don't know. Do you guys
A lot
ever
of times
interface?
what I'll do is when I go out to these, when I do my regular inspections, you'll have an awesome community, gym residents in it.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's
The
them.
CRR team. Yep.
Yeah.
Almost every building I go into, I give the property management company his contact information. If you
Excellent.
ask him, he calls me a lot to help him with them. Sometimes I overload him.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was a gap that I needed to close
Yeah.
personally, maybe.
Now,
you know.
does DHCA have an educational component or a risk reduction component
No,
to
so-
your roles and responsibilities?
So when we come across anything, major structural damages, of course, we're going to reach out to
Right.
DPS as well and work hand in hand to get that resolved
Okay.
as well, and other agencies as well. As far as the animal safety or animal aspect, we've come across some situations where we had to get animal control
Right.
involved as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Gotcha.
I would just add too, we work with Jim and Beth Ann, right? So to do that smoke alarm installation and do
Right.
that education about an evacuation plan. So we're working with the department very regularly to kind of go out into those neighborhoods and do that door to door.
And thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure.
So people may not realize that after the fire 2 weeks ago, we have an after the fire program where we canvass the neighborhood where there was an effective fire. We check for smoke detectors, talk about fire safety, educate the neighbor if there was something specific to that incident, that specific fire incident. We try to, if it involved lithium-ion batteries, talk about battery safety, whatnot. So after that fire, our CRR team took a map of the neighborhood and went back and researched so that neighborhood was established, and those houses date back to being built in the early 1930s. they were able to go back and research and cross-reference the tax records to figure out what the permit history was, what houses had been upgraded and pulled permits for renovations. And we were able also to look at the transfers of those properties to figure out who may be aging in place. And we're able to specifically target certain homes. I don't know if it came to fruition, but talking with Claire after that, she was going to be working with After Your Alarm people to come out into the neighborhood to be a force multiplier and target these specific homes. So again, it goes beyond that initial response, goes into the recovery and goes into the safety aspect. So,
Yeah.
so thank you for that.
Yeah, I always thought things like that were fascinating as far as like the focusing efforts like that, like using data, whether it's the bystander CPR rate to focus that along with social vulnerability index, along with property tax, like whatever it is to focus those kind of efforts. Like the fact that that stuff goes on behind the scenes, I feel like is fascinating. And a lot of people just don't realize how much goes into that stuff. So. We're kind of coming down to it. Chief Light, did you have any questions come in over there by any chance through the chat?
The only one that came in was already answered.
Okay, cool. So it was answered by proxy. That's good. All right. Did you have anything else specifically before we kind of go around the table and let anybody else give any final thoughts here? So we're probably like 10 minutes or so.
Yeah. No, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. This was a really great conversation. I know has been a long time coming. I'm glad that we had a reason to convene, but ultimately these are the kinds of questions that we get from the field of like, we didn't know where else to turn, so we just sent you the referral. That can always be the answer. You can always reach out to MIH no matter what, whether it's a fire code compliance issue, an American Red Cross issue, if you've had questions, because when you guys ask us those questions and we don't have the answer, that forces me to make a connection with someone and figure it out. So I'm always appreciative of our folks in the field and our community and county partners who support us every day, and thank you for what you do.
I actually do have a question for regional services, especially for your hub. If there's somebody that does not have transportation and they're not able to use public transportation, is there a program set up by any chance with the Upper County hub to get them from wherever they are to get the services at the center?
Yeah, so, HHS has a program, but then specifically if we're talking about the Upcounty hub, they do a lot of delivery stuff. They work with a lot of volunteers, and they will close that transportation gap for people.
Nice. Perfect. Good to hear.
Awesome. We'll just kind of go around real quick. Rudy and Steve, do you guys have anything else you want to add as far as things we missed or things you want to bring up after we run around the table? Or
No, just
good?
Send us an email and we'll look into it.
Awesome. All right. Well, yeah. That's
So,
cool. No, thank you
pictures.
guys very much. And I had pictures are important. That's a good takeaway.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming. I said I personally really wasn't 100% clear on the distinction, so I think it's good educational information for sure.
So one of the, at least for me, which was one of the lightning experiences to how they can help us. We had a fire in the Burnt Mills neighborhood right before I came up to headquarters, and it was a single-family rental unit that had 10 people living in the house. They did not have access to the kitchen, so everybody was using hot plates in their personal rooms. The plumbing, there was like one bathroom that was functioning, so people were using 5-gallon buckets to relieve themselves in. Just unsanitary conditions from front to back. FEI came out, they did their investigation, obviously the orange getting calls, and then it's like, well, now what? Now we have this. And there was that for me, I was looking at this, well, this is a single family, this is a private home. There's nothing we can do here. We made some phone calls, and your director was responsive, had a team come out right away, and we were able to get that under control and get that cleaned up and get those people some help. So
And at the
thank you.
time, knowing what you knew then, I guess this is a question for me to you. What was your pathway to get to the director? Like, how did you, that was when you were a field
That was when I was
chief?
a BC.
So what was your pathway at that point to get
That
there?
honestly was going back and Googling, somebody said, oh, well, I think this falls under
Okay.
housing. And I didn't understand all the DHCA.
Right.
It's like, okay, so I'm, Montgomery County housing, things are popping up and you're working your way.
So you basically found that pathway on your own.
That was part of maybe a pride not asking for
Yeah.
help. I'm going to find this answer myself.
Right, no, I get it, yeah.
But yeah.
Sure, cool.
Yeah,
All right, thanks.
please reach out. Yeah,
absolutely.
we're available.
Thank you, guys. Ruben, anything else that you want to add or?
Yeah, just a couple things. They kind of already been said, but one is, it's absolutely a team effort every single time. I know, when your staff responds out, they work as a team for sure. But I just want to remind them also that from a an executive or leadership standpoint, there's also a ton of teamwork going on as well, right? It's never difficult to get, the Director of Transportation, Chris Conklin, on the phone if we need buses to get out there to help people for some extra support, or, Gabe Albornoz with Department of Rec, or, Dr. Bridgers with HHS. Like, every time I reach out to them, they're like, all hands on deck, whatever we can do to help those guys. So I just want them to know from an acute response standpoint, I know there's obvious teamwork taking place. There's also, executive level teamwork also going on. Chief Smedley's been, wonderful with us as well. The other thing is, I do want to endorse what was said already, which is proactive relationship building with the community it's just a lifesaver, right? When you already have those relationships, you already have someone's card, you've already emailed them once or twice to say it was great to meet you, those gaps get closed quickly. That's literally what my office does 24/7 anyway. So when there isn't time for that from a public safety standpoint, that's why we exist. Let us close those gaps. You can reach out to us, and we have those partnerships. We have those relationships. We'll continue to work on them. And then last, I just want to commend Fire Rescue for all of the community, not just the public safety response stuff. That's just life-saving, right, as I said, but all the community engagement that's taken place. You guys have been present in town halls that have been put on by council members, Don Lutke and Marilyn Balcom in my region. Chief Smedley and a bunch of you guys showed up for community resiliency. You actually led the town hall within our regional services center, which I thought was just amazing and awesome. And there's just been a lot of community support. We had a fire in Clarksburg, and the fire rescue personnel that responded came out afterward while a nonprofit was supporting community members and giving them money. They didn't have to do that. They took pictures. The families were incredibly happy. So without droning on and on, really great job, well done. Thank you again for having me.
Awesome. And thank you for what you do, and thank you for coming. So it's very educational. I think it's great for everybody to hear what you guys do as well.
Yes, sir.
Brian, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I think this is phenomenal. It's a good way to build relationships amongst jurisdictions, or not jurisdictions, but agencies and so forth. But in reference to fire rescue, like I said, code compliance, we're here to help you. The biggest thing I can ask you is call us early. Don't wait to call us late, so we can take care of whatever problem you have, be it fire alarm, sprinkler, whatever. We'll take care of all life safety issues. And if you're just locked up and can't figure out, call us, because most of the time we'll know where to refer it, just like you had mentioned.
Right.
Believe me, we get a lot of calls for a lot of different things, and if we can't handle it, we know where to send it.
If you think something's a problem, let you guys know.
Pretty
Whether
much.
it's a door closer not working in an unsprinkled residential high-rise and you're on an EMS call, it's important. It's very important, right? Notice those little things as a field provider, whether you're a company officer, a backstep firefighter, whatever it is, and let them know, because that could save somebody's life. As like cliche as it sounds, that can make the difference. So little things like that, let them know.
Might not be something we jump on right then, right there, but it might be the next day we'll definitely follow up.
Awesome. So thank you again for being here.
Oh, no, I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.
This is awesome.
Kurt, any last?
Listen, all the good words have already been said. So I'll just say thank you for the opportunity. This has been good.
Awesome. Yeah. No, thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. Avital, you got anything else to wrap us up?
No, thanks for the platform.
Absolutely. No, so this was great. Again, hopefully everybody watched. If you guys have any questions, again, if you couldn't watch it live, we understand the constraints with during the day. During the week, if you're not watching live and watching after the fact, if you have any questions and you don't know where to find the answer, you can obviously filter them to me. Avital, as I know, always opens as a resource for emailing, so feel free to email her. If it's a question for one of the other respective agencies that are represented today, we will get that question answered the best of our ability. So please feel free to ask the questions if you have them.
And Sonim phones. Our numbers are all on the Sonim phones for all the MIH teams, so feel free to use it. Call us, APS, CPS, stabilization room, crisis center, animal services. We've tried to put everything in there so that it's easily
And
accessible.
if you're not sure the pathway, again, we have the resources in the app and everything else, but call them and they will help you with the correct pathway, right? All right, well, again, thank you everybody for joining us. If you're joining us live, please try to encourage others to watch it. I think a great educational opportunity for everybody to understand the services that are offered. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.